Welcome to Franchise Canada Chats, the podcast that takes you inside the world of Canadian franchising. I'm Renée Boudakian, founder and CEO of Rubicon Franchise Partners, and your host for Season 9. This season, we're going beyond the business model to uncover the real stories of franchise owners, the risks they took, the lessons they learned, and the successes they built. Join us as we sit down with franchisees, their franchisors, and industry experts to discuss emerging trends, cutting-edge technologies, and operational strategies shaping the future of franchising. Whether you're thinking about buying your first or next franchise, this podcast is your inside track to franchise success in Canada. Joining us on Franchise Canada Chats today is Christina Strudwick. Christina is a franchisee with CEFA Early Learning in Abbotsford, British Columbia. Every business owner faces challenges, but opening an early childhood education franchise in September 2021 is a particular challenge indeed. But Christina did just that and has grown her CEFA franchise into one of the system's most consistent and successful schools. We'll talk about why franchising is a powerful model for weathering those tough times and how Christina came into this unique business opportunity and harnessed it to give back to her community. Christina, class is in session. Welcome to Franchise Canada Chats.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
It is our pleasure. So I would love to just get right into your story and have you share with us what was life like before CEFA, before really you knew franchising was your pathway for business and wealth creation. What was life like? What was your career background, and what were you doing before you became a franchisee with CEFA?
Yeah, so before I became a franchisee with CEFA, my background is in banking. So I started out in a retail bank and worked my way through various roles with sales and service, ultimately ending up in management where I led my own branch for 5 years. Alongside the retail banking industry, I was in the rental real estate market. And so I was responsible for overseeing a real estate portfolio for the past 20 years or so in the Vancouver area. On my personal side, I share my home with my loving husband, and I have 3 amazing children that keep me very busy and on my toes.
Love that. Love that. And so you had this really extensive career. And when did you know that you wanted to own your own business? What was kind of that transition or that thought process that led you from going from the corporate life in banking to then becoming a business owner?
I think I've really wanted to be a business owner for a long time. One of the things that I had the opportunity to do while working in retail banking was working alongside a lot of different business owners. I got the opportunity to meet with them and to chat with them and to see what kind of made them do what they did. And so, one of the things that I was always drawn to was having conversations with different business owners and hearing how proud they were of what they did. And they just had this sense of accomplishment. And it was something that I felt that I wanted to be a part of. I wanted to be able to do something where I really was in control and was able to have part in the success and the future of that company. And so, really that's where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to open my own business. And that's how the process really started.
I love that. And so, of course, you have options when you kind of go into that train of thinking that, I want to go from, employment to ownership, and I want to own a business. You could start your own business, or you could go down the franchising path. Now, of course, in your case, we know that you are a successful CEFA franchisee. What made you decide on the franchising pathway versus, let's say, opening up your own business, small business of some sort?
Yeah, I think, when I was doing my research about being a business owner, how to open up a business, I really realized that I needed support. And so when I was looking out there trying to uncover, okay, what are some areas that there's a demand? What are some things that, what are some businesses that are recession proof? I was gravitating towards having a franchise support system because I saw the value in their their experience. They have a tried and true concept, and it's something that they'd be able to support me in doing. Things like basic, like how do you start your business? How do you incorporate a business? How do you register your business? And then going on from there, the different steps that you have to go through. I just found that I would have benefited, and I did benefit by having a franchise support so that I could be successful.
Definitely. I think that that's so important. And a great franchisor and a great franchise brand has really strong support systems. I like to say not every brand is created equal, but the franchise model as a whole, you're really getting that support. And then it's really aligning with the right brand that has the right types of leadership, support, and really vision that aligns with your values and your goals as well. Do you recall how did you first find out about CEFA? Like, how did you come from like the banking world and then learn about CEFA in the first place?
Yeah, so that came from personal experience. When I was going through my whole journey of where do I put my kids when I'm in school, it was really eye-opening to see the different options that were out there. I was really drawn towards CEFA. I really appreciated that there was that educational component, but also learning through play. I didn't want to have it to be so much of a strict educational system, but I also wanted that to be incorporated into just their regular growth and development and play day by day. And so my experience with CEFA through my kids is what really drew me to the system. I saw firsthand the growth and just how advanced my kids had become over time, even moving into kindergarten and seeing the difference really that I saw with my kids in comparison to maybe some other kids that hadn't attended, an early learning or a childcare facility. And so I knew right away, this is something that I stand behind. I support this system. And knowing that I wanted to open up my own business, it all just kind of fell into place. And that's really when I started that journey of, okay, well, how do I become a CEFA franchise partner? And it just kind of went from there.
I love that. And so when you have personal experience, they often say that a lot of businesses are born out of, own personal problems. In this case, the business itself existed, but your desire to go into the business ownership role with CEFA as a franchisee, it sounds like it came from your story, which is always you have a strong conviction of why you want to do that. Were there any other brands? Do you recall, were there any other brands you were looking at the time? Or was CEFA like did you narrow in on that pretty quickly?
Of course, during my discovery process and kind of looking, like once I had decided that childcare and early learning was the road I wanted to take, part of my uncovering the different opportunities that were out there, I did look at what was out there, but it all really came back to CEFA and coming back to my experience with them and seeing the impact that it had on my family personally. I knew that this was the one, and this was the one that I wanted to stick with.
Got it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And I think when you have been a consumer and you've experienced the transformation, it can make it so that your experience with the brand, you want to elevate from consumership to ownership. So that definitely makes sense. Do you remember what were some of the things as you were doing your research, and of course having the really positive experience with your own children? What were some of like the research decision-making criteria that you were looking at that CEFA was checking all the boxes for?
Yeah. So, a big thing was presence. At that point, CEFA did already have quite a few tools that were available. So I was able to see that this was a tried and tested concept, that there was brand recognition. People, when you think about daycare, when you think about childcare, when you think about early learning, CEFA was always one of the top brands that would come up. So that was really important to me. Another thing too is that, when I was looking out there, just in terms of where the needs were and speaking with different developers and landlords, I really quickly realized that it was very important to them to also work with organizations and companies that were established and well known. And so these things really reinforced my decision that CEFA was the way to go. And then moving on into when I actually made my inquiry with them, right away, they reached out, they wanted to meet with me, they had questions. I just felt like it wasn't just, oh, here's another potential franchisee. They really wanted to uncover if I was the right fit to work with them. And so again, that reinforced, okay, this system really wants to make sure that the people it aligns itself with that it all makes sense and that we can be successful together and move forward with this franchisee franchisor relationship. And so, these things really, really did reinforce why I wanted to continue with CEFA.
I think that really does speak volumes. And from my recollection, at the time that you would have been kind of doing real estate search and looking for your location, the occupancy, like available occupancy at that time, from my recollection, wasn't that high. So it was more of a like the landlords had the options, and then you as a
Yes.
tenant, kind of. And so I can imagine being aligned with a brand that is very attractive to landlords made it so that, because with CEFA, you need quite a large space, if I'm not mistaken. And it made it so that you had opportunities do you feel like it opened more doors for you than you would have? Okay. And that's kind of what that is just been like a general consensus. So if we go back, rewind the clock a little bit to that crazy period of time when you really, if we think back to like thou shall not be named, the COVID-19 pandemic, it feels like it was so far ago, but at the same time, it was part of your journey because you opened in September 2021. So the world was still not quite, like, it was starting to get back to normal. But it was a little bit of an uncertain time. How did you end up opening? Like, what was your experience of opening your early childhood education center in the year of 2021?
Yeah, it was very difficult. There were, a lot of delays. Costs were exponential just due to all of the scarcity of supplies out there just to even build our facility. It was a really scary time. And, I really leaned in on the support from CEFA, from head office, to just kind of keep us on track. They really advocated for me in terms of, communicating with the landlord, making sure that our vendors were still, sending things in and working on schedule. And so, even though it was a very difficult time, we ended up opening, actually, I believe, at the right time, as COVID was kind of on the way down. Things were starting to open up. Early learning, childcare, that was really starting to open up again for all workers, not just our essential workers. And so, people were really starting to feel comfortable about going back to work, sending their kids into care, so that, they can get back to some sort of normalcy. So that was really kind of the silver lining for us, was that even though we experienced all these difficulties in the process of building our location, through COVID, we did open, in my opinion, at a great time. And, I do have our CEFA systems to thank for that, because it's just the support that they provided, kind of keeping me in there. It was easy to get discouraged, but yeah, it was difficult for sure. But I think it worked out. It worked out for the best.
I think that that's such a great perspective. And I am a big believer in things like happening, the universe has its plans too. And so I think that that's great. I can imagine the parents, the relief, because they had the comfort and they're like, okay, I'm going to send my kids to an amazing school and know that they're in the best hands, but also I don't have to homeschool them anymore because we're not doing online classes.
Yeah. Yeah. We were very specific about our protocols. We had questions in place at the beginning, sanitizer, temperature check, all those things. So people felt, our families felt comfortable bringing their kids back into that sort of an environment.
Definitely. And how much of those protocols did you have to, let's say, create, or were those created by your franchisor and then given to you to really implement in the school? How much support did you get from the franchisor in those ways?
Yeah, so I mean, system wide, we had many protocols that came, top down. The nice thing about working with CEFA is there's very much a collaborative effort as well. So if there were things that we saw, let's say on the floor, so to speak, that were working or that weren't working, we had the opportunity to go back to head office and say, hey, this is working, this isn't. Can we, adjust or change these things so that it works in our environment? And so there was, I would say the majority of the support for sure did come from systems and kind of came top down and was delivered to all of the franchisees so that we can implement them in our respective centers.
Okay, that's amazing. And I think also just a hallmark of a great franchisor and a great brand is one that is
Mm-hmm.
collaborative. As we know, there are some amazing brands that have had really things that rolled out on a national level that started at a franchise location, but also the
Mm-hmm.
thought leadership that can come from the top down of things that you don't need to figure out that they've already
Yeah.
figured out for you and they give to you. So I think that kind of give and take collaboration is really, really great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another question I have is, was there anything, so I know what the your model and just being a mom of three myself, when I was looking to put my children into childcare, one of the things that started to become important was looking at places that had grants, and
Mm-hmm.
different provinces have different, they call them different things, but was
Mm-hmm.
there any talk to me a little bit about how grants have impacted the business model. Have they been positive? Have they been negative? Has there been any uncertainty around it? And how
Mm-hmm.
has the brand navigated those challenges?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of both sides of the coin. I think the grants are great. They're amazing. And the reason for that is we've really opened up the opportunity to be able to provide quality childcare and early learning to everyone, right? Everyone is able to apply for these grants or receive these grants and then be able to utilize them for the centers such as CEFA. So that's been a great positive experience because I think it's opened the door to many families who may have thought that it may have been out of reach. I'm really proud of that. I think that that's a great incentive that the government has provided. On the other side of the coin, the difficulties in the different grants that are available is just really the uncertainty around them. And the reason I say that is because, they're very much attached to our current political parties. And so,
Right.
for example, we just had an election. And so there was a really big fear on, okay, who's going to win this election? And are they going to continue on with these amazing grants that are available? We have a wage enhancement that supports our teachers. That's great. It really is showing the importance of our early childhood educators by rewarding them with wages that are fair and that are in line with the rest of the market. So, what if that went away? That was a really big fear for us in this most recent election, and as we go through, because we really are at the mercy of the government and the budgets that they have in place. Another interesting component as well, as you mentioned, is that each province really does have different rules in place with the different grants that they offer. So that's one of the things that, our head office at CEFA really supports us with, because they have to really figure out a model that works in all the different provinces that we operate, right? And they really advocate for us in terms of working with government agencies and being on different let's call them different groups where they can share CEFA's real experience in the market and bring that back to government so they understand what does it look like actually on the floor? Like what are our current schools facing? And so because we have this presence, in the different provinces, the government really takes that into consideration and uses that when when they go back to the table, when they're thinking about these different grants. So yeah, I would say double-edged sword. It's a great positive thing because it opens up the opportunity to all families. It really prioritizes and shows how we value our early childhood educators. But on the other side, there is a little bit of uncertainty in terms of, is this going to continue? How long is it going to be here? Is it going to change next year?
Definitely, definitely. Well, um, hopefully you're able to hopefully the government continues to, support these grants because I can tell you as a recipient, like being in schools where my kids do receive those, or two of
Mm-hmm.
them are now school age, but my
Mm-hmm.
youngest is still in preschool. It's super helpful. And
For
as you
sure.
said, it opens it up to families who can have that world-class education, but not necessarily be paying like a private school price, more or
Mm-hmm.
less. So I think that that's great. I'd love to talk a little bit about capital and the capital that you had to invest, because when I think about CEFA, it's not a small build, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a significant capital requirement. And I think that a lot of folks who are listening in have questions, and some honestly misconceptions. I don't know why this
Mm-hmm.
is around capital requirements. I always give the analogy of like buying a house. You can't just go and buy a house with no money. You need to have some money, and then the bank
Yeah.
will give you a mortgage. But I'm always curious of how did different franchise owners gather that initial capital to invest in the business, and what
Mm-hmm.
pathway that they went down. So I'd love to hear from you if it was, savings, or if it was, you had the required amount for to be eligible for a loan through like a small business loan. How did
Mm-hmm.
you fund your business essentially to get started?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would agree with you. Transparency in terms of capital requirements is super important. That was one thing, right up front when I was doing my initial discovery with CEFA, was that they provided that information and they were upfront about, this is what you need to have. You need a contingency fund, just so you're prepared. Because I think you're right. I think a lot of people go into it with this idea of what it's going to cost, and then it's not a realistic idea. And so for myself personally, it was a little bit of both. I did have savings that I had put together to start the school, as well as loans, government loans. And that was something as well that CEFA supported me with. They provide you with the information that you need so that you can go to the various retail banks and apply for small business funding to kind of start up your school. So it was a little bit of both through the bank and through my office.
If you think back to like your years in banking, was it like, did you have any kind of just moment where it was like now you're on the other side of the you're on the other side of the table basically, and now you're coming to
For
the bank?
sure.
That's
For
so
sure. Yeah. I was in the customer seat at that point. And
yes.
it was nice, obviously through the connections that I had made in my experience in retail banking, it did make that process a little bit less scary. There are lots of documents involved and things like that. And so having that experience did definitely lessen the blow, so to speak, in that whole process. But yeah, it was good working with them too on the other side of the chair.
I love that. Okay, so if we go back a couple of years and think about, you've signed on the dotted line, you are now a CEFA franchisee, and you're beginning your onboarding process. Can you tell me and tell the listeners a little bit about what did the onboarding process with CEFA look like, and what kind of training did you receive as a brand new franchisee to this system and really first time business owner?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the onboarding process is nice. It was divided into different stages. From when you do your first inquiry, they're going to meet with you, they're going to have an interview. They're going to take a look, of course, financial background. Do you have the means to support a company like this? What is your educational background? What is your career background? Just to make sure that it's in line. After all, you are starting a business, right? You need to make sure that you have, a bit of that acumen for sure to be able to move forward with that and be successful. The financials are shown of the company, what you need in terms of, being successful for the first couple of years. That's really kind of the initial time frame. Once you pass that, the next stage was in looking for a location. That one was definitely the stage that took the most time, particularly in BC. It's very difficult to find suitable space. And so, CEFA does a really good job about working with different partners where they're able to identify potential locations. And then it goes a little bit deeper than that. They're also looking at what is the demographics of that area? What are the demographics of that area? Is this area able to support a child care facility? Are there children in that area? Once a suitable location is found, then it's the next step, lease negotiations. That was an area that I was really, really thankful for having the support of CEFA. Even though I have the residential real estate background, commercial real estate is a whole other can of worms. And so, having their support in terms of looking over leases, what should be in there, what shouldn't be in there, what was kind of, something that was not necessarily a red flag, and they were able to use the experience of all their other locations to really make sure that our leases were it had what they needed in them to be successful. So yeah, that part most important for me, I would say. And then moving on after that, you've signed your lease. Now it's time to build. So they have different partners that we would work with from the beginning stages of designing the school, making sure you're utilizing the space efficiently and appropriately, making sure you're meeting all of the requirements that are needed for a childcare. We work with so many different shareholders, licensing, the government, the fire department, the health department. There's so many different moving parts when it comes to opening up a center. And so the build and design phase really makes sure that all of that is in line. And then you go into what we call a countdown to launch. And that's really where there's a schedule in place. And it tells you, these are the things that you need to do, 3 months out, 2 months out, 1 month out, including hiring, HR, your contracts for your employees, advertising and marketing. And then when you open, there's that support as well that's provided for your teachers at the beginning. We have our CEFA training. All of our teachers are certified with CEFA training that is specific and specialized for our system. And so they go through all of that training, and they're really there to support you through the initial opening and even throughout, right? So it's a step process in terms of our onboarding, but they're there with you kind of each incremental piece of the way, so that you can open successfully.
I think that is, again, another hallmark of a great system is that it has process along the way. And one of the things you said, which I was thinking about, is you said with the lease negotiation, how it was so helpful to have CEFA's guidance and support. I think the key thing is you want to get it right the first time.
Yeah.
And that's what it helps you to do, is get it right the first time around. So, so once you got open, what would you say is the type of support systems that then you started to tap into that the franchisor offers? Like, tell us a little bit about what are some of those systems, and what are some reasons that you found yourself over the years reaching out for support to your franchisor?
Yeah. So, of course, initially there's going to be the training of all of our teams, right? Making sure that they understand the curriculum that we offer. And then how do we continue that on a day-to-day basis with our students? Things as far down as how do we create our classroom look, right? We have it set up in a certain way so that it makes sense and encourages learning with our kids. Even placement of the kids in the different classrooms, because we're broken up into infant toddler sections, and then we have our 3 to 5 sections. Things like marketing, right? Of course, you're first opening up. It would be amazing if you opened up at 100% capacity, but that's not the reality of it. And so they really are there to look at, okay, what does your market look like? How can we, tap into that to kind of drive families to your facility, to your center? And then ongoing support. So things like, changes are happening all the time. That's one thing that I realized very quickly in this industry, is that you really have to be open to change. Things are being amended, things are being upgraded all the time as we speak, from workspace requirements to licensing requirements, to even what the fire department wants in the center. And this is obviously all for good reason. We are working with children after all. But that's kind of support that I would reach out to CEFA, to head office. If there's a change in work safe requirements, they're gonna communicate that with us, and that's gonna come top down. And so there might be things that I might realize that I'll reach out to them for, and then that might actually then be communicated with the rest of the system. So there's ongoing support that happens at all times, like HR issues and concerns. Sometimes we might have something that might come up with a family where they want to be, involved, or they might suggest something or a change or whatnot. Head office will help us with that. Our food program, we offer food. So, we're always changing things there as, new information comes out, and just even menu updates. So there's ongoing support throughout. And, these are some of the different things that I would reach out to head office for.
One of the things that I think is underestimated, and I'm curious if it's been part of your journey, is not only the support that you can get from head office, but the support that you can get from fellow franchisees. How would you describe your relationship with other franchisees in the system? How, if anything, have you leaned on them? And has that been a support that you have tapped into?
100%. I would say that we have an amazing relationship in terms of franchisees amongst each other. We have our own little group chat where we communicate, where things will come up. I have a lot of faith in that group, and I really trust the information that's coming from them. These are individuals that have a breadth of experience. A lot of them have been there for much longer than me. They have multiple locations. And so you have at your fingertips this, pool of knowledge when things come up, and that's what I find really comforting. I know that if there's something that I'm experiencing or that I'm going through, I have this group of people that I can reach out to for support. And it goes beyond that. We know each other personally now, right? We get together, our families know each other. It's so much more than just that business relationship. And it's definitely been one of the parts of being a franchisee, being a franchisee that I would say I feel the most proud of, is that support network with the other partners. I really lean on them for support. And I appreciate all of the information that they can provide. And it's different from the information that, systems can provide. It's two different things. And I really appreciate it.
Totally. It's, this community, I always say this because it's true, is that business ownership can feel so lonely. And speaking from experience, it is a lonely journey, and it's lonely at the top. And so to have that community, which franchising offers, the franchise model offers, where they always say it, you're in business for yourself but not by yourself, and that's true of both from corporate but also of the community of other franchise owners who are running the same business, experiencing the same problems, having the same hopefully successes as well, but it's the same business in different territories. And so there's so much relatability and commonality.
Absolutely.
And just like understanding. So I think that that's great. I'd love to ask what parts of running your business have been perhaps more challenging than you expected?
Yeah. I think what an area for myself that would be the most challenging, I briefly mentioned this previously, was just the amount of involvement we have with the different shareholders, working with different groups in the city, licensing, the fire department, et cetera, the government. That kind of uncertainty, I think, is my biggest challenge. Right? We're going to continue our business day to day. We're going to do things. We're going to do things as we need to do them, and we're going to change as these changes are required. But I would say that's my biggest, let's say, fear or difficulty, is just the unknown, not knowing what next year is going to look like in terms of how the government supports us. That's my biggest fear, and that would be, I would say, it would be the biggest challenge. Everything else we get through it, we work through it, but it really is a little bit scary sometimes when you have so much riding on how the government supports your industry.
Totally. And I'm sure
Yeah.
that feeling is not um, only unique to your business,
Mm-hmm.
but it
100%.
is these are pros and cons of considering when you're looking at a different business
Mm-hmm.
opportunities and franchise brands to invest in, some of the strengths, but also potentially some of the, I don't want to call it a weakness, but just
Mm-hmm.
being aware of the model and how it
Mm-hmm.
actually works so that
Mm-hmm.
you know what to kind of be mindful of and like what can affect the business more or less. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that you have a really positive attitude about first and foremost, there's certain things out of your control. And even if the government was to change and programs were to change and grants were to change, being part of a system that you feel confident that like we'll figure out what's next
Yeah.
is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we talked a little bit about some of the tough pieces, which every in business ownership there are going to be hard parts of it,
Mm-hmm.
but there are also going to be like amazing parts of it too. What would you say are the aspects of business ownership and your experience as a CEFA franchisee that make all the like hard stuff you go through worth it?
For sure. So, as I said before, the relationships that I've built with the other franchisee, with the other partners, that's been invaluable. Like I said, we know each other personally, our families know each other. That's something that I really, really value. But I think most of all, what I value the most being a business owner, being a franchisee, is that I have that flexibility, right? It's different in terms of what, like with my family, having that flexibility to spend the time with them, knowing that when you are a business owner, you have a little bit more choice in terms of, when you're on the clock, when you're off the clock, the times that you choose to be logged in. That for me, I think is the biggest takeaway in being a business owner and particularly a franchisee is flexibility. I have flexibility and, um, you don't always get that when you're in the thick of things with your 9 to 5. Um, I also appreciate the support from head office. Anytime there's a difficulty or a change, I know that they're there working behind the scenes to support us, and that makes it worth it too. Like I'm not in this on my own. That's a big thing, so yeah.
I think that that's great because I think it gives peace of mind, knowing that someone's got your back. And
Mhm.
when something is not going right, that it's not like you will have to put this on Christina's list to figure out later. It's like someone else or a team of other people are helping to support you in working through that. So I think that that's super powerful. Um, if you were talking to someone who is
Mhm.
considering franchising, maybe kind of at a fork in the road in their life where they're wanting and searching for a change, but not quite sure if uh, they're looking at business ownership, but they're not quite sure if they want to go an independent, ownership route, if they want to go into a franchise. What advice would you give to a prospective franchisee who is considering franchising?
Yeah, so I think the advice that I would give would be to do your research. And what I mean by that is, ask a lot of questions. I think it's really important to understand, what is the market that you're going into? Who are the shareholders that you're going to be working with? What are the financial obligations that you need to be prepared for? A really big piece as well, have a conversation with people who are in that business. Talk to the other partners who have their own locations and really, look for that honesty because I think there is that component of um, kind of an unfiltered version of how things go in the system. I think it's really important. Just don't be afraid to ask questions. Know your market, know your business, know your audience, and just, you know, take it slow. Take it slow. Don't rush into any decisions, and just ask questions. That's my biggest thing. Ask questions.
I think that's great advice because being curious and asking a lot of questions can really help you to go deeper, and also reveals things to you about your own self. Sometimes it's the person is telling you something, but it's actually helping you to uncover in your own self, like, how do I actually feel about this? Or, oh, I had an aha moment. So I think that is fantastic advice. I have one final question for you. You have been an A+ guest, I will say.
Thank you.
And I have one final question for you, which is, what is one truth about franchising that you know now that you didn't know when you first bought the business?
Yeah, I would say one truth would be that I didn't know before was the level of support that I would have. I'm really lucky to have a group of people around me that are cheering for me and who have a vested interest in my success. And I didn't know that about franchising at the beginning. I really thought that, each location was kind of their own thing with, an overall head office that was overseeing. I quickly realized that that wasn't the case, particularly in CEFA. I really trust our system. I trust their partners. And I'm so thankful for all the support that they've provided.
I think you called out a great thing, is that there's a huge myth and misconception that when they look at these businesses, these franchise businesses, which have, let's say, 100 locations, that they're all owned by corporate, but no, they're really locally owned and operated businesses. And so I think that that's a great highlight, because each one of those franchise locations is owned by someone who lives most likely in that community, is part of that community. And so I think that's really great. Well, Christina, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the Franchise Canada Chats podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure to hear your story, and I look forward to continuing to follow along and see how CEFA, there's one on every corner.
Thank you so much, Renee. I really appreciate the chat today. It was really great. And hopefully we provided some insight to, those who might be thinking about jumping into franchising.
Thanks for listening to Franchise Canada Chats. I'm Renée Boudakian with Rubicon Franchise Partners, and this podcast is produced by Joelle Kidd with the Canadian Franchise Association. Missed an episode? You can find Franchise Canada Chats on Spotify, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts. For expert insights, success stories, and franchise opportunities, visit franchisecanada.online. And while you're there, subscribe to Franchise Canada e-News, a trusted resource for aspiring franchisees looking to achieve their dreams and build their franchise future. If you're exploring franchise ownership, check out lookforafranchise.ca or learn more about franchising at CFA.ca. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.